Hello and welcome to a DFS preview for the 2022 BMW Championship. My name is Eric and here is SweetSpotDFS. It's all about trying to optimal lineup every single week. We start here in the preview video by targeting the stats you want to build your lineups around. And I'll show you that through the bucket system, which if you don't already know what that is, I have a video link in the description below. I'll explain all about it. I highly suggest you go watch it if you don't know what the bucket system is. Otherwise, if you've been around, you know exactly what I'll be talking about. But I'm not just going to go over the buckets in this video. We're going to review last week's buckets to show you how successful they were and just to continue talking about how successful the bucket system has been this year. We'll also talk about the golf course as well as the tournament information. But first, let's talk about some giveaways. The first one being a subscriber giveaway. So I like to reward those that participate on this channel. I like to give money away for the goals that we hit. So the goal that I've had for a couple weeks is to get to 450 subscribers. We are one subscriber shy from that. So if we get one additional subscriber, which I feel like we're going to do, I'm going to give $30 away. And if you want an entry into this giveaway, you got to be subscribed and you got to comment down below. So if you need a topic, you can leave whatever comment you like. But if you need a topic, give me your favorite 9K and above golfer you're going to play in your lineups this week. That's an easy way to get an entry. Now you get one free entry per video that I put out a week, and I usually put up to 3. Last week I only put out 2, just didn't have time to do the third one, but you can get up to 3 entries this week just by commenting on all of my videos and also being subscribed. There's one more additional entry you can gain by sharing any of my videos on Twitter. You can get up to 4 this week, or 3 depending on if I have time to do a prize picks video. Either way, we're more likely going to give $30 away. So again, if you want the opportunity to win $30, be subscribed, comment down below. Another giveaway that I'm doing is a prize picks giveaway, but this is more like a refund. I'm giving you the opportunity to play this for free by putting, if you sign up using the promo code SweetSpot and put $20 in your account, I'm going to give you that $20 back. Plus prize picks will match that deposit, so it'll double that initial investment. So it'll go up to $40 and it won't cost you anything except for some sign up information and that initial deposit. But prize picks will match your deposit up to $100. So you don't just have to put $20 in, you could put up to $100 and you're still going to get this $20 from me by using the promo code SweetSpot. Link in the description below. Another thing I like to do is provide a cheat sheet. So throughout all these videos that I like to create, the preview, the strategy, I usually go over the information you see on the screen right now. This is a part of the cheat sheet. So this is what I actually call the dream sheet, which has all the information that I want when I go through and try to pick out my golfers. But we also have the bucket system for this tournament here as well. So when I go through this video, if you want to follow along, first of all, the cheat or a link to the cheat sheet is in the description below. Once you get to this site, go up to the file menu and make a copy. It's the only way you can access the filters that I actually have on this spreadsheet. And the whole reason for that is I only give people read access that has the link. I don't want a bad actor coming in here and just deleting everything and making it a pain in the butt for the rest of you guys. Not that that's ever happened. I'm just preventing it from ever occurring. So again, go to that file menu, make a copy. That way you can use the filters that I will be using throughout this video. I will have an optimizer for the strategy video. Wait till that strategy video comes out, but if you do want access to it, send me an email at sweetspotdfs@gmail.com. Let me know you're interested in using the optimizer, and I'll send it your way. You got to be subscribed as well, and you got to comment on, well, I'll talk about it tomorrow in the strategy video, but you just comment on that strategy video. That way I know you're participating and I will reward you with the optimizer. So that'll also be available. But other than that, let's go ahead and get into this. And I think what I want to do first is talk about last week's tournament and go over the buckets. So I have a little section on each of my tournament pages that holds the bucket system, just to show how successful those buckets were. Now, the success is driven by how many golfers were inside the top 10, as well as how many golfers were in the optimal lineup. Now, okay, so these two numbers are being compared against my minimum projection and my maximum projection. If there are more top 10 golfers, like this one right here, this bucket right here, the last year twos, so there were 4 inside the top 10, my projection was somewhere between 0 to 2. Now, if there's more inside the top 10, I just go down to the optimal lineup and just see what the max was there. Like, obviously we see 2 here. Well, that fits inside that maximum projection, so it was a successful bucket. Basically, what I'm telling you is you want to select up to 2 golfers from this bucket to put inside your lineup. And well, 2 of them were in the optimal lineup, so that bucket was successful. And I do that for each one of these buckets. So you can see we have a bunch of Ys, which is really nice to see right from the get-go. As we go down here, we see 2 buckets that failed. We had the recent form 5 bucket as well as the salary 6 bucket. Now, the recent form 5 are basically people who average a missed cut over the last 7 weeks. Yeah, not really good golfers to choose from. My max projection was 1. So I don't really think this hurts you all that much, but we will definitely double check if it does, because I'm going to use the optimizer from last week, build some lineups just to see if we can still beat the GPP winning lineup, which I will also talk about here shortly. But the salary 6 bucket, those low 6K golfers, I would never want you to play more than 1 anyways, so I'm not too worried that that bucket failed either. As it shows on the screen, 34 out of 36 buckets were successful. That's a pretty good week. I would love to see 36 out of 36, but the buckets that failed, I'm not concerned that they failed. So let's go to actually talk about the optimal lineup versus the GPP winning lineup. Right away, I'm just going to hide these columns. I want to show you that they're here, but I'm going to hide them because it's just noise. So this pulls in the optimal lineup, the GPP winning lineup, and the realistic lineup. And I'll talk about each one of them here individually. Your optimal lineup, basically were your top 6 golfers in, well, I mean, there's a bunch of people that tied for 5th place, but your optimal lineup was Will Zalatoris, Sepp Straka, Lucas Glover, Brian Harman, Colin Morikawa, and Trey Mullinax. That all equaled up to be 44,300 salary spent. Now, I'm not an advocate for leaving a lot of money on the table, so this optimal lineup, really unrealistic to get to. That's why I created a realistic lineup. Again, I'll get to that later. This scored 647 points, which is pretty good. The GPP winning lineup scored 613.5. Now, remember that number because in order for the bucket system, in my opinion, to work, I need to create a lineup that follows the rules of the bucket system and still takes down a GPP. So we'll see if that does that when I use the optimizer here. But that GPP winning lineup used up all $50,000 of the salary. This is what I usually advocate. Don't leave more than $1,000 on the table, but really don't leave more than $500 on the table. Just build your lineups as close to $50,000 as possible because most of your GPP winning lineups use nearly all $50,000, if not all $50,000 of the salary. And of course, that lineup actually had 6 golfers inside the top 12, which is very good. That is a very, very good lineup. Zalatoris, Sepp Straka, the guys that tied for 1st. Obviously, Will ended up winning in a playoff. But the 1st and 2nd guy, then 3 5th place guys, and then Sung Jae Im in 12th place. That's a really good lineup. Now, the realistic lineup scored 622.5 points, and that used up all but $400 of the salary. And usually what I like to do is create a lineup that has all 6 golfers inside the top 10. That's usually what the bucket system goes. I mean, that is what the bucket system goes off of, is top 10 finishers. So the realistic that I have includes Joaquin Niemann at 13th place. Now, this is a DraftKings game, right? DFS golf is all about scoring as many DK points as you possibly can. Not what placement you get, but Joaquin Niemann is still outside the top 10 of DK scoring. So there is something to be said there. Still, with using him, we would start with John Rahm in the 10K range, go to Will Zalatoris, then drop to Joaquin Niemann in the 8100. Actually, we'd go to Colin Morikawa. So we have two 8K golfers, a 7K golfer, and one low 6K golfer. So you remember how I was talking to you about within the bucket system, this low 6K bucket, how I didn't care that there were two golfers in it. I didn't care that it failed. Well, my max projection was 1. If we use the realistic lineup, we only used 1. So that was good. That all worked out. And actually, when we follow those buckets, they all work out. So, you know, nothing. That's one less bucket that failed, in my opinion. So we have 35 out of 36 buckets that were successful. Now, I'm not going to like try to figure out the recent form. Actually, maybe I can. Maybe we can right away. If we take a look at, so recent form 6s, if we use the realistic lineup, and I kind of loaded it in here already, we got these green salaries, that implies that is the realistic lineup. Do we have more than one recent form 6 golfer? We don't. Is that the bucket? Oh, recent form 5. I'm sorry. Not recent form 6. So yeah, we would still have to use 2 recent form 5. So that one's going to fail no matter what. You'd have to replace Colin Morikawa with someone else. Okay. Let me just double check this. 5, yeah, 0 to 1. Okay, so this is where I'm going to bring in the optimizer. So I have all of the points loaded up into the optimizer. I have every other piece of information we want. Once I hit run optimize, it's actually going to follow just the maximums of this bucket. I took out the minimums. The minimums are actually in this column right here. These are the minimums. So you can, if you want, you can cross-reference these at home just by pausing the video and taking a look. But once I hit run optimize, it's going to use, my head's kind of in the way, but 49,500 or above. So between 49.5 and 50. When I run this optimize, I mean, the optimal lineup is already built in here. But if I go ahead and run optimizer, we're actually going to drop Sepp Straka and pick up Lucas Glover. And this scores 600, no. This scores 616 points. So if you remember, I told you pay attention, or just remember, I should say, just remember what that GPP winning lineup was, 613.5. So yeah, if we follow the buckets, just the maximum projections, we take down a GPP. And of course, we also use Joaquin Niemann, who did not finish inside the top 10. So although it doesn't match the sweet spot process to a T, we're all 6 golfers inside the top 10, we still take down a GPP. And that's really all that matters. So the buckets were 100% successful, in my opinion, because we scored enough points to take down a GPP. And that was the $5 GPP. So last week was a success. Now let's move on to this week's tournament. And I'm actually going to take down the optimizer and pull up the tournament information, because I kind of want to talk about this. And then we'll go into past optimal lineups, and then into the salary buckets, and then go throughout all the buckets. So this tournament, the BMW Championship, was established in 2007. It was, I can't remember if that was when the FedEx Cup playoffs actually started. I'm sure it was, because this is kind of one of the staples of the FedEx Cup playoffs. So it's a relatively new tournament, and it kind of has a rotational, like the golf courses it plays at, it kind of rotates. So a rota, as most people call it. This year it's at the Wilmington Country Club, which is in Delaware. First time playing this on the PGA Tour, so there's really no course history or any course data that you can actually use, but we can still use tournament information, and we'll get through that, because one of the buckets is your course history buckets, but this week it will be called tournament history, the tournament history buckets. And the reason why they're relevant as opposed to just not being important is this is the second leg of the playoffs, and it always has been the second leg of the playoffs. They're trying to win $10 million by being the tour champion. or being the FedEx Cup champion, which obviously you want to play well each round of these playoffs. To me, I think this tournament, gotta be careful with my words because I don't want to say these PGA Tour players are going to treat it as if it was a major, but in order to win the FedEx Cup playoffs, again, $10 million. In order to win $10 million, you got to do well at this tournament. Currently, Scottie Scheffler's in the lead for the FedEx Cup playoffs, and that's because he won 4 times this year. He's got a pretty sizable lead. So no one's going to get there by getting like top 10 finishes. There are going to have to be some wins that have to help catapult these players up. I think I don't remember the points that Scottie's sitting on, but I think he has a pretty like sizable lead, like 500 plus points. The winner of this event gets 2,000 points, if I remember correctly. So in a way, there's no like letting off if you are any of these players. I was gonna say a well-known player like a Jon Rahm, like an elite golfer, but really it's any golfer. So the reason that I would use tournament history, or why I would apply it, is because the tournament has always been the same. It's always been a part of the playoffs. It's always been move on to the next round. So there is some relevancy to tournament history. That's all I'm trying to get at. I don't know the scale of what it would be because obviously I haven't played in this tournament, or I haven't, participated in the FedEx Cup playoffs. But as a competitive golfer, I know that this tournament matters. So you don't have to be a competitive golfer to know that. It's just this tournament matters, okay? And I don't think anyone, like I said, is going to take a day off or just not care about this event. So let's use tournament history to our advantage. Let's move on. Field size, 68 players. I'm not providing, there is no cut, but I'm not providing like the average win score. Obviously, there's no cut score, mostly because this is a new tournament. And although I said we can use tournament information, we have no idea what this tournament's going to play like. Like, we don't know what this golf course is going to play like. Is it going to be a tough course, or is it going to be an easy course? Can't figure that one out just right now. So it's hard to, I wouldn't want to give you an average win score and then have you go out there and do your research with it and then just not apply. So we're just going to leave it alone. Strength of field, 634. Now, someone asked me, how do you get the strength of field score now that the OWGR has changed? I figured out the calculation. OWGR provided the calculation. You just had to, read the text and figure out, what added to what. My strength of field has never been absolutely perfect. It's always been within like 7 points, either plus or minus. So, like just to give you an idea, the strength of field really could be 641. It could also be 627. But somewhere around 634 is what the old strength of field score would have been. And I'm going to continue to provide this because I've used it for this whole year. I've used it for the last 2 years, I should say. So it's one of those pieces of data that I'm going to continue to collect and continue to add into the database that I'm eventually going to show you guys sooner or later. And just continue to use it for just to measure each tournament. Moving on. The weather looks pretty good. Looks like we've got 86, 88 degree days, so that's pretty warm. Wind, pretty benign, 5 to 10 miles an hour. Not a lot of wind. We already talked about which golf course it's being played at. The architect is Robert Trent Jones Sr. He has been an architect to many of the tour golf courses, or the golf courses the tour has used. So you can use that as a data point. Par 71, 7,500 yards. That's a pretty long yardage to par ratio that we've seen on tour. I don't know really how much that really matters. I know there's a couple long par 5s that I'm not sure the tour players are going to be able to reach. This being bent grass. Bent grass doesn't really roll out. Now they can obviously dry it out and firm it up, and then it will roll out. So tee shots will roll out, but more often than not, bent grass doesn't really roll out that much. And greens are pretty spongy as well. So we'll see how this course plays. But I assume some of the par 5s are not reachable. like I was just talking about, greens, fairways, or bent grass, and then your rough is fescue and bluegrass. And I did look at the golf course hole by hole and determined, you know, only a couple holes are really required to have a certain type of shot shape. So it looks like a draw is more beneficial here than a fade, but not by much. You can get away with hitting just about any type of shot shape. But if you did want to have a tiebreaker, hitting a draw seems to matter just a little bit more. Okay, let's go ahead and get into past optimal lineups. Let me just pull it up here. We'll start in 2017, I believe. Yeah, 2017. Your optimal lineup left $200 on the table. So we used up $49,800. And the optimal lineup had a 10K golfer in it. 8K, 8K, 7, 7, 6. So 6,900 was the lowest price and 10,700 was the highest price. There is essentially your 10, 9, 8, 7, 7, 6 build that I always talk about. You just substitute one of the 9Ks for an 8K and you got it. So it's 10, 8, 8, 7, 7, 6 for 2017. In 2018, we left $800 on the table for the optimal lineup. And we used an 11K, 8K, 2 7s, another 8 and a 6. So this is now twice we've seen 10, 8, 8, 7, 7, 6. Now Justin Rose is 11,000, but I consider him the 10K plus golfer, or 10K and above. So that's how I look at it. In 2019, we left $200 on the table once again for the optimal lineup. And we used a 10,000, 9,000, 2 8Ks, a low 7, and a low 6. So this is kind of an interesting twist here. We substitute one of the 7s from that 10, 9, 8, 7, 7, 6 model to another 8K. We use a low 10, a high 9, 2 mid 8s. I mean, one low 8, one mid 8, and then a low 7 and a low 6. So that's an interesting build. In 2020, we left $600 on the table. So we're not leaving a lot of money on the table for the optimal lineups. Your $5 drive the green winning lineup didn't leave any money on the table. But talking about the optimal, it was a 10K and above, 8K, 7, 7, 7, 7. So that's an interesting one. Again, you can make up to 2 substitutions from that 10, 9, 8, 7, 7, 6 model. Obviously, we moved from a 9. We actually just moved from a 9 down to a 7, and then a 6 up to a 7. And that's how we get our 4 7s. I know it's a bit of a jump for a substitution, but that's how I look at, you know, the substitutions you can make. A substitution that I would say you can't make is just going all 6 golfers as 8Ks, or having 5 7K golfers and 1 10K. Those are substitutions that would not work out, in my opinion, because you'd have to sub from a 9 down to a 7, an 8 down to a 7, and a 6 up to a 7. So that kind of substitution doesn't work, because you'd have to make 3 different substitutions. Anyways, moving on. In 2021, we left $500 on the table, and that one does not start with a 10K golfer. It actually has 2 9s and 8. 3 9s, an 8K, a 7, and a low 6. That's a very, very unique way of building. That also follows the 2 substitutions. We're subbing from a 7 up to a 9, and we're subbing a 10 down to a 9. So 3 9Ks, an 8, a 7, and a 6. So there's many ways you can get there, but we're not leaving a lot of money on the table if you've noticed that. Now let's jump into the buckets and take a look at the salary buckets. I'm gonna actually cruise through this pretty quickly. There's not much that I really need to talk about when it comes to the projections. The projections are just the projections. There is a formula that's driven in here. What I want you guys to focus on is these minimum projections. This would be your, you always round down. So this 0.94, we round down to a 0. 1.98, rounds down to a 0, although it's really close to a 2. So just keep that in mind. I mean, it rounds down to a 1. I'm sorry. This rounds down to a 1, although it's really close to a 2. So keep that in mind when we go through this. If any of these over on in the max projections aren't greater than 2, then the minimum is always 0. Even if it shows a 1 point something, it's still 0. So when you go across and you look at this, again, if you're following along on the cheat sheet, this is available to you down here in the strokes gain. Again, you can apply those filters by going to the file menu and making a copy. So if you're following along, you can see these projections as well. One thing you can't see is the miscellaneous information that I have over here. This is just kind of for me to understand how, like, the quality of these buckets. This is kind of like, I just started adding this maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago just to get a feel, because I wasn't sure the projections were completely accurate. And this bucket over here is more of like a quality test. This is using my sweet spot score for each golfer and applying it to the bucket. So it gives us kind of like an overall quality check. It kind of also waters or brings everything closer to the middle, which I'm not sure how I feel quite yet. This is more of a trial and an error thing. So this first bucket, you can see it's 0.94 to 1.57. Now the quality of this bucket actually improves based off of how many golfers that we have in there that has a good score, a good sweet spot score. Also, by the way, we have 4 golfers that are 10K and above. And I think this is just goes without saying, your best golfers are in this bucket because they're 10K golfers. I think that's probably the best way to put it, but it does take into account the success rate of that bucket throughout the last 4 or 5 years. It also takes into account how many golfers are in this bucket versus how many golfers there have been in this bucket per year, and it's lower, it's less than. So that is why the projection is pretty low. Usually this projection is somewhere between 1 to 3. So really, you could use up to 2 10K golfers if you wanted, but I'd just stick to 1 at the most. I always like to start with the 10, 9, 8, 7, 7, 6 approach. But if the 10K range isn't something you're really looking for, hopefully the buckets kind of give you a little bit more comfort in knowing that it isn't necessary to put a 10K golfer in your lineup. Now going down, the 9K range is 1 to 4. That's what this would read. Remember, we're rounding down here and we're rounding up there. So 1 to 4. However, the quality of golfer in this bucket isn't as high. So I think at most you want to play 3 golfers. At most. And at minimum 1. I think that's fair. I am going to try something new this week where I'm actually not going to put any of the min projections into the optimizer. I'm going to keep it all at 0 and just keep these at the max. Might actually kind of come back to the quality of these buckets, and that will be my maximum. Like I might round up from this bucket or from the quality buckets. I think that might be the best approach. But yeah, so here are all your minimums and here are all your maximums. You know, starting with a 10 or a 9, obviously the right thing to do more often than not. And we just went over all the pass optimal lineups, showing you that you do either want to start with a 10 or a 9. And I think that's self-evident, and that's usually self-evident every single week. So let's move on and go to the next bucket, which I'm just going to go right into the strokes gain buckets. Now, if you're unfamiliar with how I do strokes gain, that video that's in the description that I talk about with the bucket system, I would go watch that because that'll explain it. Otherwise, if I'm stuck here explaining it here, it's just going to add like, 2-3 minutes onto the video, and we don't need to add that. All you need to know is if you're following along on the spreadsheet, these numbers are already loaded in. Just to prove that, if we go to the dream sheet, your strokes gain 1 numbers are right here next to the golfers in the column. So I don't really need to explain. You just need to know what the projections are. Minimum's 2, max is 4. but the quality is 3.8. So I think you don't want to go more than 4 golfers that are stroke chain 1, but you want at least 2. Moving on down, stroke chain 2, cap it at 2, and really it's 0 to 2 for that bucket. Stroke chain 3, 1 to 3, and that actually stays up because the quality golfer in there is pretty good. Stroke chain 4, 0 to 2, and then anything less, I mean, I think Ches Reavie's the only golfer in the stroke chain 5 bucket. You can probably just ignore that. It's not going to give you much of an advantage, and it's not that great of a quality bucket. So yeah, probably just leave that one alone. Moving on to the core of the buckets, going into the last year buckets. Last year ones, having a top 20 finish, that actually plays pretty high at this event. I'd say anywhere between 1 to 3 golfers from this bucket is actually a good place to start. The quality obviously says 2.7. The max is 3.07. So you can either play 1 to 4, or I would say 1 to 3. I think that I'm comfortable with that. Last year 2s is that 20 to 40 range, 0 to 2 there. Last year 3s, 0 to 2 there as well. Last year 4, there's no golfers here that are last year 5. That makes sense because usually you don't have 80 plus golfers. It's the top 70 that make it to this event. But anywhere north of 60, probably stay away from. Doesn't look like it's a super promising bucket. Although we do have one 9K and above golfer in this bucket. So maybe, let's see, who is that? I wonder. Last year 4s. Colin Morikawa. And you know what? This week, I'm probably staying away from Colin Morikawa. So I'm probably not really playing anyone from this bucket. And then the other ones, actually your last year 6s are not bad. Patrick Cantlay won this tournament last year being a last year 6. He had not played the year before in the BMW Championship. So if that gives you a little bit of confidence to play golfers from that bucket, all the power to you. Moving on from last year buckets, we go to last week. This is basically trying to explain, does last week's results matter? And emphatically yes. Because being in the last week 1 bucket, which is the top 20, so golfers who top 20'd the week before, super good bucket. And I need to validate that there were 10 9K and above golfers. That just doesn't seem right. Go to 2022 recent form. I can hide this here. Yeah, maybe there were, because Rahm finished 5th, JT finished 13th, Zalatoris won, obviously. Finau was 5th. Then all of these guys finished top 20. So it's this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there were 10 9K and above golfers. Obviously the buckets keep track of how many golfers show up inside the top 10 every single year. This little bucket, or this little column here, the minimum, this is telling you at a minimum how many golfers finish inside the top 10 from any of these buckets. 3 from the last week 1 bucket. Now here's the tricky part. We were just talking about these golfers. 10 of them are 9K and above. There are a total of 23 golfers in that bucket. Even if I were to tell you like the projection was 2 to 5 golfers that you want to select from, there's a good chance that you can't play more than 2 because of the price tag. Because what if Jon Rahm and JT finish 1st, 2nd, or say like 3rd, 6th? Let's say JT finishes 6th. You're going to want to play Jon Rahm, who finished 3rd, and you don't want to play Justin Thomas, who finished 6th. So that's the tricky thing about the bucket system, is these projections will be correct more often than not, but you won't be able to play up to the amount of golfers that, you know, help that bucket succeed in numbers. So like, we could have 3 golfers in the 10. Well, let me double check here. Yeah, so Zalatoris, these 3 guys could finish inside the top 10, and you can only play one of them. What if all 3 do finish inside the top 10? That 3 golfers inside the top 10, that hits these projections. So it makes that bucket successful. You can only play one of them. So be careful about that. That's what I've learned over the past. Now, this quality bucket, or this quality column that I have over here, I kind of like, because now it's kind of telling you play somewhere between 2 to 4 golfers, err on the side of 3 or less. I think that's a good way to start, and starting with one of the 10 or the 9K golfers in that bucket, pretty good. I mean, you could start building your lineups with 9,700 Tony Finau and dropping down to any of these guys here, and you're gonna be just fine. I think you'll be just fine. So if you did want to go the balance route, it fits this bucket narrative. Just letting you guys know. All the other buckets from there, nothing is obviously nothing is an anchor bucket except for maybe last week 5s, and those are guys who missed the cut, believe it or not. So like your Rory McIlroys, Scotty Schefflers, they're in this bucket, projecting somewhere between 1 to 3. And now that I look at the quality buckets, it's really 0 to 2, because this max projection is 1.99. Remember, if it's not over 2, the minimum is automatically a 0. So it's really up to you. I mean, I do like Rory this week. You can go right back to Scotty, that's fine. And then there's obviously Jordan Spieth. What's the likelihood of one of these guys finishing inside the top 10? It's pretty good. And that's kind of how you gotta look at these buckets. But I don't think 2 of these guys are, I don't think it's good enough for 2 of these guys to, but it's still possible, obviously. It's possible based off of how good they are, but it's also basically what the projections from the bucket system are predicting, or projecting, I should say. So it's doable. How much faith do you have in it? That's the big thing. I don't personally. I don't mind playing one of them, but I'm not going to play 2 of those guys. So I'm not going to anchor any of my lineups around like a Rory McIlroy and a Jordan Spieth, or a Rory and a Scotty, or even a Scotty and a Jordan Spieth. I'm not going to do that. I'll play one of them, but I'm not going to play 2 of them. Moving on from there, the next one to go to would be, now it says course history bucket, but remember this is tournament history. I just didn't have the time to change it. This is just showing you, remember these are lead-in stats. So my course history has always been, for every single tournament, been recorded before the tournament starts, what each of those golfers' course histories were, or tournament histories were, leading into the tournament. So I stamp them right there. And then I see how the tournament plays out, what the results are, and then I record that. I'll record the success rates of each of those buckets. So, this doesn't, the course history doesn't change. Like it, how do I say it? So Patrick Cantlay won last year. Last year's bucket system has it without Cantlay's win, obviously, because it was stamped from that moment and prior. So it starts before the start of the tournament, or it's been recorded before the start of the tournament. Just so you guys are clear, because some people, when they put in their stats, it keeps updating, and it doesn't, it's just to me it's a misuse of stats, or however you want to call it. But just to let you know, they're all recorded before the event starts. So when I say that, and you go to the cheat sheet, let me just bring that back up, and you scroll over to the course history bucket, or the course history column, and you look at each one of these guys' course history. This is at the start of the tournament, and this then gets captured, and once the tournament concludes and we have all of our results, then I look at all the buckets and how successful they were, and then that gets added to next year's bucket system to show you guys how well any of these course histories ranges, how well they do. And again, course history range is built into each of these bucket numbers. Watch the video if you're unfamiliar with that. That's too much rambling for me. But anyways, course history ones. Those are your guys, or again, tournament history. those that have a top 20 finish here on average, how well have they played every single year that they've played? Or every single year, someone with good course history coming into this event, how well have they played? You know, the success rate's high, the frequency rate is high. At least one golfer from this bucket is always finished inside the top 10. And I'm projecting somewhere between 0 to 2. So keep that in mind. Course history 2s, that 20 to 40 range. There's a lot of golfers in this bucket. I mean, just over there's 68 golfers total in this event. 32 of them are in this bucket. This is also a very successful bucket, but it's also a volume-driven bucket. So I would say you want somewhere between 2 to 4, although the projections show 3 to 6. Remember, the max or the quality bucket is over here. I don't know what to call this. This is just a quality check. 4.39. That actually rounds up to 5. I'd say 2 to 5. Somewhere between 2 to 5, you want to build your lineups around that many golfers. Totally up to you. And then the rest of them kind of just shake up to 0 to 2 or 0 to 1. So it's really, I think, imperative to start with some good tournament history golfers and build around them. And then the last bucket to talk about are the recent form buckets. My recent form goes back 7 weeks. If you are unfamiliar with that, I like to use 7 weeks because that's like 2 full months. Because it's looking at the last 7 events, which once this tournament starts, that will actually be 8 weeks ago, which the beginning of the 7th event was, you know, pretty much 8 weeks ago. With that being said, nothing changes. This is pretty universal. Every single tournament, the projections look a lot like this, where it's like 0 to 2 really good recent form guys, and then it's like 2 to 4 recent form 2, 1 to 3 recent form 3. This is pretty universal every single week. Let's see if the FedEx St. Jude had the same thing. So if we went to recent form, 1 to 3 of your top 20 guys. Oh, it didn't. Changed. 0 to 2 recent form 2s, but 2 to 4 recent form 3s, 0 to 2 recent form 4s. So it kind of stayed the same. If we take a look, it's just now this bucket, the recent form 2s, actually one of the more important ones. So coming in here with good recent form matters. And I think there's like a common sense thing here too. Because this is the second leg of the playoffs and has been for some time, you kind of have to have good recent form in order to make it into these events. I'm not saying last week's event really, you know, has a lot to do with influencing these buckets, but in a way it kind of does, because your best golfers, like if we were to take a look at 2022 and we look at all these tournaments that were played beforehand, these tournaments right here were played the same week, but you have your the Open Championship, and then the Genesis Scottish Open, which most people who did play in the Open ended up playing in that tournament. We've got Patrick Cantlay, who has a 4th and 8th place finish. Even Xander Schauffele has a 1st and a 15th. Now, he doesn't have that really good recent form, but then we can go down to Matthew Fitzpatrick, who had, a good finish last week, as well as a good finish at the Genesis Scottish Open, and not a terrible finish at the Open. So those all get influenced into these buckets. I mean, like Tony Finau, 2 wins and then a 5th place last week. So over the last 7 weeks, coming in with some good recent form, it incorporates these good tournaments, and every single year these tournaments have been played within that recent form time frame. So just a long way of telling you that good recent form matters here, and really having anything with an average finishing position of 40 or greater over the last 7 weeks is where you want to build your you want to select golfers from. And I think you want to select at least 3 golfers that fit in those buckets. Whether they be 3 from the recent form 2 or some kind of combination of 1 or 2 from recent form 1 with 1 or 2 from recent form 2. I think that's the best way to start building your lineups, and then you just go from there. Sprinkle in some recent form 3s, and then a combination of recent form 4 through 6, maybe no more than 2 golfers, although there are only 17 golfers to choose from, so it should make choosing those golfers a little easier. But that is all that I have to talk about. Kind of rambled a little bit in there, so my apologies, but it's late. I'm tired. I tend to ramble when I'm tired. Just some reminders though. You want a chance to win $30? You gotta be subscribed. You gotta comment down below. Gave you more details on what you can do earlier in the video. Just go ahead, rewind, check that out, because I'm gonna try to get out here fast. Prize picks. If you want to play this, or if you want to try playing this for free, you just gotta sign up and put $20 in your account using the promo code SweetSpot. I'll refund you the very next day. You have my word. I get an email letting me know that you signed up and you deposit, X amount of dollars into your account. So I'll have that information and I'll just send it right back to you. Again, cheat sheet. There's a link in the description below, and the optimizer will be ready once I create the strategy video. This is all that I have for you guys. So thank you for watching. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, bye.